And yeah, we could get started. So hello everyone. I'm hosting another RDV Academy seminar, and today we'll be talking about some tactical FPS fundamentals. This is going to be a lot of information. I will share the slides afterwards if anyone's curious and wants to revisit the content. The content's going to be a mix of some very basic things that y'all will already know, um, as well as a mix of some very niche concepts or ideas that y'all might not be familiar with. So yeah, this seminar is kind of geared towards any skill level. And please feel free to ask questions if I use some terminology that you're not that you don't understand or aren't clear about. But yeah, with that aside, we can get started. So there's a couple of core themes that I'll be talking about today. We'll go through team play, in-game like mechanics, in-game economy, decision making as like an individual or as a team, and then communication. There's definitely things that I've missed in this deck, but I will be updating it since it is kind of like a live deck. So the first concept is team play. This is like how you as an individual can work better with your teammates, or how your team as a whole can work better and more effectively to convert round wins. One of the biggest things is actively setting up crossfires. Crossfires, I can go into the Valorant real quick, but crossfires help with trading. It is basically a situation where, let's go to Ascent on Valorant. You all should be able to see this. Let's say we're in a 2v1 with the enemy Brim on B site CT. Let's say I'm playing back site B and I have my teammate playing garage. So this is kind of the setup that we have, where I, as the attacker, and my Killjoy teammate as the attacker as well, we're in a 2v1 situation against this Brim, and we have info that he's CT. So I call for let's set up a crossfire, peek off me for CT. If you look at like the vision cone, which I'll put on the Astra here, which is me, I'll be able to see when the Brim crosses the CT like line. When he pushes a CT line, I can take a shot, or I see the Brim and I make a comm. My Killjoy should be looking at a minimap for this. The Killjoy can take a swing and peek off of me in a way, and that is kind of like a crossfire, where the Brim sees me, starts shooting at me, and isn't aware or isn't able to flick to shoot at the Killjoy fast enough. There's a lot of crossfires that you can set up for like almost anywhere on every single map. It's a matter of just communicating with your teammates and being like, hey, let's set up a crossfire for CT or something along those lines. So communicate and work with your teammates to set up crossfires. It doesn't have to be a 2v1 situation. It can be different numbers, but setting up crossfires will help with trades. And I'll mention this later in the deck, but trades win rounds and rounds win games. So this is like a concept that I think is really important. Another concept is don't hold the same angle. If, for example, going back to the Valorant, I'm holding the CT line, there is no need for my jet to also hold the CT line. If I'm holding the CT line with this vision cone, for example, right here, my jet should be playing tucked if they're playing on that double stack on B site Ascent and holding the lane. So that way we have both entrances to the site covered. That's kind of what it means to not hold the same angle. This is like a really bad positioning for the jet. If the jet is also holding the CT entrance to the site, no one is holding lane. So again, don't hold the same angle. If you notice that, if you're dead and you notice your teammates are holding the same angle, comment and be like, you guys are holding the same angle, switch to something like jet, switch to lane. Another concept is setting up high-low fights. There are a lot of positions on these maps where you can set up a high-low, for example, especially if you know where an enemy is. So for example, let's say we are defending on Ascent on the A site, Let's say I'm spotting from heaven, and I also have my jet who is playing hell right below me. We both have the same like line that we're holding, which kind of goes against the last point, but it is a high-low. So let's say if an enemy Killjoy peeks the A site from A main, they're gonna see both players, but have to shoot one. And let's say the Killjoy kills my jet or kills me as the Astra, my other teammate will get the trade. Since the crosshair placement is going to be a little bit difficult for this Killjoy to kill one player and then kill the next. So high-lows are really effective, especially if you know if an enemy is at a certain point or at a certain place on the map. Another good high-low that I've used before is a high-low in tree. Both players are peeking cat. Let's say you have some kind of like Killjoy utility knowing that lets you know that no one can push A. Y'all double set up for a high-low fight on cat. There's a very low chance that the enemy player will kill both of you. Most likely a whiff will happen if that happens, but this is really effective for trading down like high-low situations. Going to the next topic. This again goes back to trading. Position yourself to be able to trade effectively. Trades win rounds, rounds win games. You want to be in a position where you can swing to take another fight if your teammate dies and to trade them. I'm going to hammer this concept and again, but trading is incredibly important. Getting numbers down and trading down is advantageous in most situations. There are certain situations which I'll explain down further in the deck, but as a high level concept, position yourself to be able to trade. Trading wins rounds and rounds win games. Another, I guess, idea or concept is if you see your teammate taking a fight, don't just idle. If you're close to them and you're in a position to be able to swing to take a fight with them, do that, or provide some kind of utility, whether it's, for example, like a side smoke or a flash or a stun. Say, I'm dropping a side smoke on your right, you can play in and around it, or I'm flashing for you, or I'm stunning for you. All of these things help your teammates take better fights or higher percentage fights, which is really effective. And helping your teammates this way will trade down, and as we know, trading wins rounds and games. So yeah, if you see a teammate taking a fight and you're in a position to help them, do that. Do not hesitate. This is so for duelists. This is a very high level idea of like what duelists should do, but your job is to entry and to make space or chaos on a site take. As a duelist, you should trust your teammates to follow you in and trade, and you as a duelist should not fear dying. The whole point of a duelist is to go in and to make that space and chaos. Like, for example, let's say we're taking a site on ascent and we have my jet dashing into a cloudburst, like a smoke. My jet is going to have most likely a Sova dart as well as let's say a KO flash above them, above site. Their whole job is to enter site and make space and create chaos. Let's say there is a Killjoy playing back dice. This Killjoy is going to have to make a decision to, one, shoot the dart, which they're probably not going to be able to do if the dart and the flash are timed correctly, as well as take a fight on the jet that just dashed in. Let's say they kill the jet, but my KO also scaled effectively onto site. The KO is able to trade down and kill the Killjoy. So again, as a duelist, just keep in mind that dying is not an issue as long as your teammates are running into site with you and are able to trade you down. Your job is to make that space, make that initial like push into site, create that chaos, and disrupt like how the defenders are playing. Support players, your job, as I mentioned this earlier, is to follow your duelist into site for most of the time when they entry. Your job is to trade and take site. Your job is also to set up utility to help duelist entry. Like, for example, with that Valorant example from Ascent that I just showed, we had a dart and a flash. Your job is to provide supporting utility and then keeping your gun up as you go into sight to trade down. Your duelist is making the space. You as a support player need to capitalize on that space and really enter and trade down and get sight and get spike planted. Another concept is scaling effectively. If you're splitting a site, for example, like let's say you're splitting a site on ascent, spacing is key, and both lanes should generally be pushing together. It will cause a lot of chaos for the site players. So let's say the site setup is some form of like Killjoy playing like a back dice on A with their setup, whatever it may be. I'm just making a random setup for now. Let's say you as the attacking team are doing like a 3-2 split. We'll have, for example, like your Jet, your Sova, and let's say your KO going Cat. We'll have the attacking Killjoy and the attacking Astra going A main, for example. These two groups of players should be pushing together. Once, for example, your Cat players are able to take the Cat space, this applies a lot of pressure on the site player. They have to focus their attention on not only, for example, the switch door right here, but also the A main players. So if you're able to scale into site together as groups of two, you can put a lot of pressure on the 1 or 2 site players that are on site. And again, trading down is key here. So if you split a site correctly and with the correct spacing, you'll be able to take higher percentage duels, trade down, and then win the round. So that's kind of it for that concept. This is more of like a team thing, but and less so ranked. But use timeouts. If you're feeling pressure, if you're unsure what to do, if there are nerves, use a timeout. Call it. It can calm your nerves down. It can slow down the enemy momentum, and it'll give you a minute to, as a team, to just take a deep breath and strategize on what to change or what to do for the next round or few rounds, based on how the enemy's playing. So especially in like your league matches, use them. You have 1 timeout per half and 1 timeout in OT. So that's 3 timeouts a game or a map that you can use. Even using a timeout to just take a deep breath and slow your team down is worth it. So yeah, use timeouts. They're there for a reason, especially in like the league matches that we play. The next concept, and this concept could quite literally be its own like seminar, but I'm just putting it into a single slide for now, since we don't have that much time, is defaulting. Might have heard of the concept of defaulting. It's used to take some kind of map control, get some kind of information, and condition your enemy, and then deny enemy information on your team's end goal. So a lot of teams, especially in like a 5v5 coordinated setting, will initially start off with like a default, and that default will look the same most rounds. That kind of conditions your enemy that, hey, they're starting off with like a default, but we kind of have no idea what their end goal or end intention is. I, as like a caller, might say, hey, let's start with like a 2-1-2 default, and then get some map control, break some kind of utility like KJ utility that we know is at a certain point on the map, and then let's end A. Other rounds we might do the same default, break the same utility, but end B or end C on Haven. Defaulting is a great way, again, to get some map control, get some information on how the enemy's playing their setup, conditioning the enemy, especially if your default is consistent from round to round or most rounds, and then also deny enemy information since the default looks the same to them every single round. They don't really have an idea of like what your end intention or end goal is. I've also linked a tweet here by DDK, who is an awesome person to follow on Twitter and just follow in general. This tweet talks about like what defaulting is at a much deeper and fundamental level. So I highly recommend y'all to look into this if y'all are curious and have time. The next fundamental, and this is something very niche, on low info, like let's say it is a 5v5 or a 4v4 and you're defending. The enemy team has cut noise and you don't really have an idea of where they are. Let's say your Sova or your KO died, so you don't really have info utility to quickly scan an area. Consider a 2-man push on a lane for an info or fight. Let's say me and my Jet are playing on a site. We don't have any info as to where they could be. This is risky, but again, you can call a 2-man push into A main to just grab some info. This could give you info that, for example, they're not A, or if you run into enemies, you have some kind of info saying, hey, there's 1 or 2 enemy players towards A main. This could leave gaps on the map, but it is worth a gamble for information. Like, for example, here, this is leaving a gap where an enemy player could walk up cat, depending on how the setup is. So it's kind of one of those high risk, high reward plays, and it's mainly to get information. If it gets too hot, like there's too many enemies, fall off and just reset. And now you at least have info that, hey, there's an enemy KO and an enemy KJ on the A side of the map, when initially at the early round, KO knifed B site, which means he rotated over. And that's a bit of like hard info saying, hey, they started B and they're ending A. So yeah, on low info, again, consider 2-man pushing lanes for info or fights. This is a high risk, high reward play. This idea or this concept, again, could be fleshed out a lot further, but at a high level, you want to retake and execute sites together as a team. I believe the next slide has a further description about retaking, but you want to essentially retake and execute sites together, unless there's like some kind of like a lurk. So for example, you as an attacking team might have 4 players towards the A side of the map on ascent and try to take that together. You might do a split, or you might do 4A main. Whatever you do, just do it together. You don't want a situation where, for example, like your Astra is like your lurk, which is fine. Your Killjoy is mid, your Jet's inserted mid right here, and your KO and whatever your other agent, let's say it's a Brim, have spike and they're taking A site. That should not happen. You, as a team, should make the call to group and hit a site together. Look at the positioning of your teammates and decide, hey, does it make sense for us to take spike into A site? Probably doesn't. Sure, we might win some aim duels. Sure, we might get spike down, but look at the positioning of our team. This isn't really geared towards a good site take. A better setup might be to call your Jet and your Killjoy to cat and run the A split. So it just requires coordination and communicating that, hey, we want to take site together. On a similar note, you want to retake site together. You don't want to be in a position where you're funneling into site 1 by 1 and getting picked off. You want to dump utility at roughly the same time. You want to rush into site together to break enemy crosshair placement, to create chaos, to essentially just take site together. That's all this is saying. When retaking site, you want to make sure to catalog your utility that your team has for the retake. You'll see certain teams, for example, just run into site, even though they have certain utility up, or run into site 1 by 1, which is not great. When retaking together, this is a very valuable con that you can say, which is one is knife up or one is dart up. That can help position your team in a way that it tells your teammates to basically wait. So let's say I, as the caller, for example, say, hey, when is next start up? Let's retake on next start. And my Sova says dart up in 6, and then my breach says stun up in 4. So my teammates are communicating that, hey, we're going to retake the site together at a certain point when dart is up and stun is up, or we retake off of dart. Cataloging utility goes a long way because that means you can util dump a site while taking it, creating chaos, breaking crosshair placement and making the retake a lot easier. And site players will potentially have a very hard time holding site when retaking like that. The next concept here is contacting. Contacting is like when you walk until you hit some kind of utility or an enemy, and then you pop for an execute. So a certain play, for example, that you can make on Ascent is, let's say you smoke mid early as an attacker, and you, for example, 4-man or 3-man contact cat. What this play does is you're just walking into site. You are waiting until you hit some kind of like utility, whether it's like KJ utility or an enemy player holding the line. Once that information is given to the enemy team that, hey, we are here, that is when you speed up. So you're essentially denying information with this group of 4 up until a point where you see an enemy or see some kind of utility that gives them information that you're there. And at that point, you just pop. So contacting is super valuable, especially when enemies don't have much information or just don't know where you are. Another concept is peeking off me. This is, again, actually goes back to the idea of setting up crossfire, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But the comm, which says, hey, peek off me for CT, goes a very long way to help coordinate your team in a situation where you can set up a crossfire. But yeah. This is more of a team play thing, but tempo changes can throw enemies off. Like, let's say the enemy team is, for example, doing a default every single round for like the first 2 to 3 rounds or 4 rounds, whatever it is. The 5th round, they change up the pace and do a 5-man fast site hit on A. That will catch enemies off guard because most likely they've been conditioned that you are doing a default. And they are potentially aware that you are going to do a site like a tempo change, but it's hard to kind of predict that thing or play around it. So they're kind of, the setup that the defenders are using is something to counter like the default or play against the default, which might not work against like a fast site hit. So in summary, change up the pace. Like, let's say you've been going fast 4 rounds in a row, maybe change it up and go slow, work picks. Or if you've been conditioning 4 rounds in a row, change it up and go fast 1 round. Things like that. It'll throw enemies off guard, especially if they're trying to read you. This concept is when planning a spike, if possible, plant in locations that can be seen from multiple angles and positions. There are ideal plant spots on every site, and then safe or default plant spots. So I'm actually going to switch to Ascent on Valorant for this example. Let's say spike, let's say we're going to the B site. There is a default plant, which is generally most protected and is a safe plant. This is assuming that your teammates have scaled up on site, they're protecting you while you're planning, giving you some kind of utility, covering you while you're planning. But yeah, this is like a default or safe plant spot. A more ideal plant spot, which is definitely riskier because it's exposed to more angles, is something like this. The reason why this plant spot is even better is because it can be peaked from multiple different angles. So not only can, for example, B main see spike, not only can yellow take a peek at spike, not only can, for example, wide yellow take a peek, but also you have mid or your orange players taking a peek here. This plant spot is great, especially if, for example, you have a player that will go late mid for like a reflank and kind of be the win condition. So again, try to plant in, first of all, plant safe if you need to, if it's too hot on a site and there's too many people or too much utility being thrown at you. Otherwise, try to find these like plant spots that are that are the ideal, what I'll call the ideal plant spot. So for example, on Icebox A site when attacking, the nest plant is amazing. You can peek that spot from pipes, you can peek that spot from like belt, you can peek it from like top belt. You can have Viper lineups for it. You can peek it from Nest. You can even peek it from lower jail. So there's a lot of different angles that are really good. And one more thing, like you can even peek it from boiler. So there's a lot of really cool spots that you can plant that improve the potential for you to win the round, especially if they're planted more open. For example, if the spike was planted in the corner, which is default because it's the safest plant, it is a lot harder for your team to play back and dump utility in the post plant. Your team will have to fight up to be able to have vision on the spike to see if they are diffusing or not, which is definitely harder. So again, plant in more open spots that are seen from different locations or angles if you can, if it's safe enough to. Otherwise, of course, go to the safer default plant spot. Next concept I have here is when faking a site hit, fake 3 to 4 agent utilities. So for example, let's say we're running a fake on a sent B site. What I might have is I might have my jet actually dash into switch. I might have my KO and my Sova towards the B side as well. KO is going to send a knife for sight. My Sova is going to dart for giraffe. My jet's dashing in. My controller player is going to have the default smokes up. This kind of looks like a sight hit, right? But in reality, we have our KJ and our Astra slow creeping with spike into A main, with the eventual goal of jet dashing into side, creating chaos, trying to work as many picks as possible, with our KO and our Sova leaving, and our Astra and our KJ taking spike to A and planting in an open spot that's visible to, for example, Cat, as well as like A main, right? So that's kind of just the idea of like faking a site hit. You want to show roughly 3 to 4 pieces of utility, which will make them think that it's an actual hit. But yeah. And selling with like a fake jet dash is huge. Like teams over rotate when they hear or see the fake jet dash, or not the fake jet dash, but a jet dash. The next concept I have is kind of just high level, but at the end of a round or a half, if things are not going your way, just do a mental reset, take deep breaths, take it round by round. But yeah. The next theme that I have, and I'll try to go quicker, is mechanics. Try to tap and not spray. There's a lot of good YouTube videos on this, but in this game, you want to be burst firing or tapping. There is a really good video of Ye describing how he like taps and how he takes duels, and I can link that after the session, but it's a really good watch. So again, high level, just tap, don't spray. Otherwise, the recoil will impact your ability to get kills. There was a discussion about this in the Academy General a few weeks ago or a few days ago, and that kind of led to this point. But in chaotic situations, keep your weapon out. Weapons kill and not utility. I make this mistake from time to time as well. It is really frustrating when I'm in a tense situation and I pull out utility instead of keeping my rifle up. Again, 9 times out of 10, your rifle will be the thing that will kill the enemy and not your utility. So yeah, in chaotic situations, keep your weapon up. And you can also tell your teammates to keep your weapon up too. If you see your teammate using utility, say KJ gun up or rifle up, something like that. Something quick that gets the point across. Another thing about mechanics is crosshair placement is key. Let the enemy move into your crosshair, which is less movement, and it makes it much easier to kill them. Furthermore, Valorant has a lot of visual guidelines that kind of show where your crosshair should be placed to be head level. You'll see this on site. For example, you'll see like a single stack. The top of the single stack is normally crosshair level. It just depends how far you are from the box, but there's a lot of really cool visual guidelines in Valorant in all of these maps that kind of show where your head level is. And you can even test that out with like a friend. Go into a custom and go check it out. Holding angles. There's a video for this that I've linked, so I won't really go too deep into this. I have the following slide covers some of these concepts. But let's say there's 2 players. We'll go with the example on the right. Inherently, the player in blue, so player B, in this situation is at a disadvantage. If you look at the line of sight, the enemy player, which is player A in red, is going to see the shoulder of the blue player first. So when tucking into angles, that I highly recommend not tucking into angles. If anything, I recommend an off angle that an enemy won't expect. Tucking into short or like angles like these, like bind showers, is not great because an enemy can walk clear you and see your shoulder and then pre-fire you. I highly recommend not playing in one and dones like these corners because you're just going to get either util dumped or walk cleared depending on what the angle is like. I highly recommend playing some kind of like an off angle. So for example, if I were to go to that bind example, well, bind isn't even on the maps here, but this is bind, showers. I would like to play here. This is an off angle that will catch the red player off guard because they'll be expecting me to be in the corner when in reality I'm a little bit wider to their left. This also ties into the next concept about clearing angles by slicing the pie. There's a video that I've linked here which goes into much better detail, but when you're clearing an angle or clearing a zone, you want to slice the pie. So first you want to start by clearing the shallow angle here, then take the next slice of the pie and clear the following angle, which is a little bit deeper, followed by the next deeper angle, followed by the deepest angle. If you peek by slicing the pie, it's much easier to also pre-fire or kill enemies. And I just highly recommend, again, just slicing the pie, especially for like newer players who aren't really familiar with clearing angles. Another concept, which you can search for YouTube videos on, is learning how to jump spot or shoulder peek. I do this a lot, especially on Haven. When I'm normally like the seaside anchor, I will be jump spotting the C line. It gives me an insane amount of information if I'm able to jump spot from backside of C to see if any enemies pushed up C. Jump spotting or shoulder peeking will give you quick info without having to commit to a fight by going wide. It's much harder to shoot enemies that are jump spotting or shoulder peeking. It works really well on defense. It works really well in post plant as well. Like let's say I am playing post plant in a 1v1 against a Cypher that is trying to defuse Spike. I have no other util. It's a pure gun duel. The Cypher taps Spike. I have no info whether he's actually on or not. What I can do is instead of going wide to take a fight or find that info, if the Cypher is sticking, you can just run a quick jump spot to just see if the enemy is on or off, which is a lot of info. And you're a much harder shot to hit. So again, highly recommend learning how to jump spot and shoulder peek for info. Can be used in both post plants or on defense. This concept we already talked about a bit, but you can use off angles to catch enemies off guard. It's kind of like that bind showers example where instead of playing tucked deep into a corner, like a shallow corner, you play a bit wider. You play slightly wide so that the enemy doesn't expect that you're there and you can catch them off guard. Another concept or fundamental is in 1vx situations where it's winnable, like for example 1v2 or 1v3, and you think it's worth going for the win, try to isolate as many 1v1s if possible. You don't want to peek into 2 people or 3 people at once. You want to slow clear angles. You want to try to find those 1v1s. Normally, 1v1s will be mistakes by the enemy. If the enemy is giving you 1v1s, they're essentially throwing the round. They should be setting up crossfires. They should be setting up double swings or double peeks, triple peaks, something of that nature. But if you're in that unlucky situation of a 1v3 or a 1v2, try to find as many 1v1s as possible. It will make the round more winnable. In post plant, you want to buy as much time as possible. The longer you stay alive, the higher percentage chance of you winning the round. So what this means is you want to layer some kind of utility. Like on first tap, if you're playing offsite, we want to use a KJ Molly. On second tap, if we have the second KJ Molly, use it. On third tap, we want to use a pull. On fourth tap, we want to use a Sova ultimate. Buying as much time with utility and layering utility effectively will lead to situations where the defenders who are trying to retake will have very little time to get on spike. And essentially, it'll convert to a round win for you and your team as attackers. I already talked about this, but yeah, again, in post plant, you want to layer utility. You don't want to use all of your utility at once, like both of the mollies, your ultimate at the same time, and your pull. You want to like layer them one by one to just draw out the round. The lower the time, the much lower chance it is for the retakers to win the round and defuse a spike. In post plants with numbers up, go for a reflank as a win condition. What I mean by this is, let's say we're in a 3v2 situation where it's me, my breach, and let's say my Sova playing C-Long. We're all playing off site. Spike has been planted default. And I, as the Astra, have a gravity well or a pull on spike. My Sova has dart up and my breach has stun. And it's a 3v2. So let's say there is an enemy Omen and an enemy Phoenix, for example, that are trying to retake site. In this situation, it doesn't make sense for all three of us to be long, especially if we're not fighting site. My Sova and my breach have utility that they can use from C-Long, like a stun or an aftershock or a flash or a dart. What I can do is I can go for like a mid reflank. In this situation, my breach and my Sova will be using their utility first. I've already communicated that to them. They're going to dart on first tap, for example. Why? Just to see if they're on or off. They'll flash on second tap to try to get them off. And then by the time that they're done using their utility and then they start actually taking fights, I still have my pull available and I'm late garage. So even if in the case that my breach dies, my Sova dies, my pull is gone, and it's now a 1v1, this Omen has very little info as to where I am. He doesn't know if I'm actually still tucked C-Long. He doesn't know if I'm behind him. He doesn't know if I'm garage. And now that I've gone for the reflank, you can go for the 1v1 kill. And it's most likely very low time, so you should just go for the kill. Reflanking is super effective because players just don't expect that you're there. Good teams will obviously check for a reflank and re-clear mid, but it just depends. It's situational. So the third theme here is economy. You want to be on the same buy as your team. Either you save, either you half buy, either you full buy as a team. There is one exception to this, which is a hero rifle that I'll get to later, but high level, you want to be on the same buy as your team. If you see your teammates forcing up, you force up as well. You can always make a call to tell your teammates to do a half buy if they mistakenly full buy when your whole team cannot full buy. So again, high level, just be on the same page as your team. On enemy eco, you want to protect your teammates' rifles and then potentially use them as bait. Let's say the round starts off and we're attacking. The enemy team makes a play and gets a pick. It's now a 4v5, but we have the rifle in sight. The enemy's fallen off. We can either use that rifle as bait and kind of just hold that rifle to see if the enemy reaggresses to go pick that rifle up, or we can take that rifle and just throw it away off the map. That's also another option. But yeah. The next idea is keep an eye on enemy ult orb economy. Run plays to deny orbs if the enemy's one away from critical ults, like a breach ult or KJ ult. Also, if the enemy is on an eco and the jets one away from knives, they're most likely going to go for an orb to use their blade storm. So you want to fight for orbs. Y'all can run 2 or 3 man plays to dump utility or fight for orbs. It just depends. And the main thing is you want to have the awareness to keep an eye on enemy ult orb economy to be able to make plays or just deny them orbs if need be for certain ults. The next concept is keep an eye on enemy credit economy. Know when they have an operator online if they're on a save or a full buy. Just keeping an eye on enemy economy will go a long way. Like for example, if we're attacking and I know that the jet has 5,700 credits, which is just enough for an operator and full shields, probably means that they saved for an operator there, which means that we need to use utility to clear out the op or find out where the op is. Another situation is if you notice that an enemy is on a save or a full buy. If they're on a save, they might be making an aggro play somewhere to get picks or get guns. If they're on a full buy, just a standard round. But it's the main thing is for like knowing whether an operator is online and if they're on a save and to expect aggression on a save. Get an operator online for your jet or chamber. Can always trade weapons. This slide deck is way too dated because I have chamber still here. But again, try to get your jet or like an operator if they're comfortable with it. You as a teammate can always buy your jet, the operator, and the jet can then buy you your rifle. So again, ops are oppressive, especially when people don't know how to play against them. So try to get one online as soon as you can. If the enemy is saving an operator in a 1vx situation and your team has the economy to hunt, try and kill the op player to deny them taking an operator into the next round. This even goes for rifles. If your team has the economy to hunt, you should go on a hunt and kill the enemy players so that they can't take the weapons or shields or whatever into the next round. Hurt their economy, essentially, is what I'm saying. If your team can afford a hero rifle on an eco, do it. A hero rifle can honestly snowball into multiple picks, into new weapons that your team can pick up and make the round winnable. So if your team can do a hero rifle or two, do it. It's definitely worth it because your teammates can also always pick up the hero rifle if your team, if your player dies with the rifle. The next theme that we have here is decision making. So at a high level, on man disadvantage, you want to minimize risky plays. So let's say we're in a 5v4 or 5v3 situation. There's no reason for us to push. And I'm speaking strictly for defense here. If we're in a 5, I'm going to go back to Ascent actually because it's just a lot easier to explain things. But yeah, let's say it is a 5v3 situation. Let's put up a couple of players to make it 5. We basically have almost all of the lanes covered with our positioning. The enemy team is grouped up towards like B main here, let's say. There's no reason for me as a player here to push for info and run into a stack of 3. When you have man advantage, you want to keep that man advantage, which means you don't want to push. You want to play safe. You want to play for info and less so to kill people. That is the main thing. Minimize like the number of risky plays that you make. On man disadvantage, however, you want to be making the risky plays to hopefully get some kind of an advantage and convert the round to a win. In a 3v5 situation, you want to make those hero plays. You want to make those aggressive plays or those lurk plays to find a pick to make it a 3v4 or a 3v3, which is much easier than a 3v5. So again, on man disadvantage, make risky plays. On man advantage, do not make risky plays. Play for info. Play for trades. Play for keeping the numbers up. We already kind of talked about this, but the next idea is don't push on enemy ecos. Take longer range fights with your rifles versus their weak buy. There's no reason to push. It's a full buy, like your team's full buy versus an enemy team eco. They're looking for picks. They're hunting for guns. They're looking to get numbers to pick up rifle, like your rifles. Just don't give them that opportunity. That's kind of it. Characters with escape abilities should be taking early risky duels since they can get out for free. I don't know why this is in decision making, but here we are. So yeah, your Jet, Chamber, your Reyna should be taking those early risky duels since they can usually get out for free, and get those early picks. The next concept that I have here is knowing when to save. There are certain situations, like for example, certain 3v4s or 3v5s, where it makes sense as a team to full save instead of retaking, or just don't go for a sight hit and just save your rifles into the next round. This is super situational, but if you are able to save, for example, in that 3v5 situation on a retake or a sight hit, you might have enough money to have 4 rifles next round with a stinger, which that round is most likely winnable, even though you don't have 5 rifles. So keep in mind of your team's economy, and if at a certain point it's worth it to lose a round to save your economy and go for another full buy next round, consider that. It is super situational, but yeah, that is a high level concept. Know when to go for exits. There are certain situations, like for example, a 3v5, where you know that your team's economy is really good, but the round is unwinnable. The enemy economy is a bit weak. It might make sense to just go for exits and go for picks. If the enemy can't take all 5 of their rifles into the next round, there is a chance that they'll be on a slightly lower buy. Like for example, if it is a 3v5 retake, instead of going for the retake, I call my team. So let's make an example on Valorant here, actually. Let's say my team is, we're retaking through Cat or something. And all 5 enemy players are up on a site. We make the call that the round is unwinnable. There's too much utility, too much post-plant util, low time. We decide to just go for exits. Let's say like the enemy team all exits through A main. We can go for a full-on 3v5 fight here. This is super situational again, but going for picks here, and let's say you kill 3 of the enemies and you lose 2 of your rifles, which leaves Breach alive and leaves the Omen and the KJ alive at the end of the round, Breach being on my team. It hurts their economy if, for example, 3 or 4 players die. So in certain rounds, it is worth it to go for picks and go for exits if your economy is healthy and the enemy economy is weak, instead of going for a round win. Super situational, just have to be in the moment to know when to go for it or not. One of the other concepts here is know when to gamble a site, especially if your teammate is pushed up on one side of the map. You should stack the other. Let's say we're playing CT, we're on defense, and we have a setup where it's Astra, Cypher. I'm just gonna put random agents here: Neon, Fade, and Omen. So it's a 5v. Let's say 5v5. So I'll put a couple of agents here towards B main. All 5 agents, let's say. Let's say I push out A and I get full info that, hey, they're not A main. And let's say that my Cypher has a trip for Cat or something, right? So that they can't cross into tree. What this means is if I'm pushed out A and I have all of A main control and we have Cat control with like a trip or an alarm bot, my Cypher can rotate over and double up with the Fade or triple up with the B side players to gamble that, hey, the enemy team might actually be going for a B hit. So in summary, if you push one lane, works really well on Haven, especially like pushing down C long, especially if you don't see anything occasionally. Don't do this every round. That's a lot of info for your teammates to stack towards the B site or the A site of the map. The next concept is when you're stacking a site on eco, on an eco round. Let's say you lose pistol and you're on an eco against an enemy buy. You don't want to show numbers like agents, utility. You want to bait the enemy team to run into the stack. So let's say we are stacking C after a pistol loss, and we have a couple of crossfires just set up of some sort. we have like one person breaking like util, like Sova Dart, etc. You don't want to show more than one or two people on site. You want to bait the enemy to go into site. You want your, for example, your Gecko to peek, to do a wide peek to break Sova drone that might be trying to clear the close angle. So again, when you're on eco and you're stacking, try, which is a really good play, try not showing numbers or agents through utility or just showing yourself. You want to bait the enemy into your stack, and instead, you don't want to scare them away from a site hit. Good teams will do their due diligence to clear a stack and cancel off of it, but again, the point here is when stacking a site on an eco, don't show. This goes for like most rounds too. When stacking a site, just don't show as much. Bait them into the stack in the setup. Last few things. At times, it's better to play retake instead of dying on site during enemy execute. Let's say an enemy is just doing fast pops. It might even just be better for you to just play off site, use your util of some sort to stall, but stay alive and then retake together with your team and your teammates' utility. This is a niche concept, but something that is very valuable and I personally like doing a lot is pushing my own team's mollies or smokes. It can catch enemies off guard. Sometimes people think that mollies or smokes are free zones that they don't have to worry about anymore. Pushing your own smoke, pushing your molly can catch enemies off guard, and it's worth throwing in from time to time, not to do something like this consistently. This concept is, let's use utility with purpose. Think about what value you get from the utility you use and don't waste your utility. Every util that you use should have some value or some kind of purpose. At the end of the round, it might be worth, if you're learning a new agent, think about how much value you got from that utility you used. Was it a waste? If it was, then what can you change going forward? So again, in summary, just use utility with a purpose. When lurking, wait to push until your team starts executing, which should force rotates by the enemy team. Again, could go on a whole presentation about how to lurk effectively, but when your teammate starts executing on one side of the map, like let's say A site, that's when you might hear rotates on the B side of the map and be able to push. Or when spike is planted, that's when you make the push. Lurk timings are hard, but they are doable and can catch enemies off guard. Don't hold the same angles or positions, run the same plays. It becomes predictable and will get countered by good teams. This is something that I see happen often. Just don't do the same thing over and over again. People will read it, people will predict it, people will counter it. This game is very dynamic. You shouldn't be doing the same things over and over again. Sure, it might be working, but at some point it's going to get countered. You want to change your setups up. You want to be unpredictable. You don't want to get countered by enemy teams. Cool. And the last theme that we have here is comms. I have a couple of minutes left, so I'll try to skip through this pretty quickly. When comming in this game, a really valuable comm is calming the number of agents you see or hear, the location, and which specific agents. In this game, you can determine agents, like which specific agents are in a certain location, by listening to their footsteps, aside from the utility that they might throw. Each agent has a pretty unique footstep, and you can actually tell who is where. So calming, again, the number of agents, their location, and which specific agents goes a long way. This is a very valuable calm and will help your teammates kind of have the awareness that, hey, there's maybe 3 towards the A side of the map, and the KJ and the Astra are missing. Another concept here for communication is calm the utility that you hear or use. It helps your teammates position enemy players in their own mental model. Kind of touched on this on the last slide, but when you calm a lot and you make effective comms and your teammates are listening to those comms, each player can build up their own mental model of where the enemy positioning is. This is really helpful for IGLs because if your teammates are constantly feeding you information about utility or agents, you can build up that mental model to say, hey, I see 2 mid and 3A main, but that was early round, and now that I see that the KO is now B main when initially he was A main and he threw a knife. It's late round, so he's leaning towards B. This might be a B hit. Things like that will help you as a player build up your own mental model. So be really, I guess, make sure to calm what you see and hear. It is super valuable in this game. Even if you look at pro VODs and their comm VODs, they are always calming. They are calming quite literally everything. Like for example, if the Harbor Cove goes up, they'll say Cove up. If the enemy Harbor Cove goes down because your teammate shot it, they'll say Cove down, even though your teammates can see it. That kind of like level is really amazing to see. But what y'all can focus on here is just like calming like anything and everything you hear. Just making sure your comms are effective as well. The next concept is when rotating, make sure to communicate to your team what gap you're leaving so nearby teammates can adjust accordingly. So let's say, I'm gonna go back to Valorant really quick for this example. Let's say it's myself. Let's go back to Ascent here. Let's say it is myself on A site playing dice and my jet is playing tree, peeking cat. Let's say there's some kind of a call to get my jet to rotate over. My jet should be communicating like, hey, I'm leaving a gap tree. At a higher level, it'll be better awareness by players to know that, hey, there's now a gap here towards tree. But it doesn't hurt to communicate, hey, I'm leaving your tree, there is a gap, they could walk up your cat, which means that me as Astra, I might want to reposition into a spot that I can hold something a bit more passive and not be pinched on site if I were playing dice, for example. So again, yeah, when rotating, call out gaps so your teammates can adjust accordingly. After death, only comm agent location and damage. Communicating frustration to teammates comms helps nobody. You don't want to be the person who is complaining about dying to an unlucky death, which it may have been. Just communicate to your team the agent, location, and damage, if the damage is worth it. Like the person's 120 or one shot. Last few things, comms from dead players are fine and encouraged since alive players might miss specific information, but do not flood comms. Even though you might be dead in a round, doesn't mean you can't provide value to your team. You can help your teammates by telling them certain utility is available for them to use, which might help them clear a certain location. You can communicate to them other information that they might miss because they only have their own view of the round and not what the other two or other remaining players are seeing. So dead players should be calming, and it is highly encouraged. But make sure you don't overcom and flood the comms. It is a very it's a gray line, I would say. Again, don't flood comms during clutches. Let the player work. They're already in a stressful situation. Just don't, flood their comms and let them think and work. Keep the comms positive. Motivate players that are struggling. Hype up your players that are making cool plays and getting a lot of frags. Mental is almost everything in this game. I would say it's like 70 to 80% of the battle. Like keep mental and comms up. It will help. And yeah, that's kind of what I had for the slides. I know it was a lot, but I'm happy to answer any questions if y'all have any. I have a thread in the channel if y'all want to use that. Can give a couple of minutes for Q&A. If not, gonna wait like another 30 seconds, otherwise we can probably call it. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a permissions issue, RC, with this voice channel. I did create a thread in Academy General where y'all can ask questions if you have any. There's something bugged with the permissions with this channel. Okay, looks like RC might have a question. Okay, so RC has a cool question. But when it comes to ecos and hero buys, is there an amount of creds that qualifies for a hero gun? It can quite literally just be a gun and half shields. That is what I consider a hero rifle. You don't really need utility. You don't really need full shields. If you can buy a rifle, which is usually 2,900 credits, and half shields, so that's 3,300 credits, go for it. If you can spend the 3,300 credits and still be able to buy full util or mostly full util, full shields, and a rifle next round, go for it. It can help convert rounds. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? Give it like another minute. Okay, so RC says, does that apply to hunting for the XV1 op? If your team has money to hunt for enemies that are saving, with your team being able to buy into the next round and not lose too many rifles, go for it. It's worth denying the enemy team carrying an op or multiple rifles into the next round, especially if their economy is hurting and your team has pretty decent economy. Looks like Cilantro might have a question. Cool. This is a neat question by Cilantro. They said, I play a lot of Cypher and Viper. How can I read situations on when to lurk and what not? I feel like that's a playstyle I struggle with and want to implement. That's a really good question, and it is very hard for me to answer because it is super situational. But you should throw in a lurk from time to time. It's not something you should be doing consistently. Enemy, like good players and enemy teams, will recognize lurks and be able to read certain plays off of lurks. Like, hey, their Cypher always lurks when the enemy team is doing a sight hit. So if we find the Cypher, we probably know which side of the map the enemy team is leaning towards. In terms of like actual lurking and how to lurk, that is something. It's something that comes with experience, I guess. It is knowing rotation timings, knowing what agents you see on what side of the map, and when you have an opening or a gap. One thing which is really effective is, for example, which opens up lurks, is, for example, let's say you're attacking, and as part of your default, you want to break Killjoy Alarmbot or Killjoy Turret. That will leave a gap on the map. Your team, after that default, after breaking that utility, can start leaning towards one side of the map. The enemy team will rotate, like the defenders will rotate to try to retake or prevent a sight hit, opening up a gap on the map, and then you can take the lurk timing. If you can get into advanced positions, that really also helps with lurks. So going back to Valoplant, which hopefully y'all should be able to see. There's really good positions on most maps where you can get really good info. Um, for example, let's say on Haven, a really good spot as an attacker, just to hear rotations, is the B cubby. Doesn't mean you have to take any fights, but you can quite literally hear attackers if they're making the mistake of making noise while rotating. Another really good spot is A sewers. You can hear quite literally, like, I don't know what the sound circle range is. I don't think they have they don't have a tool for it, but you're able to hear rotates. So if you're able to insert players, especially your lurk player, they're able to hear rotates. They're able to hear rotations. Like, let's say the enemy omen is stomping and leaving A site. That might open up a gap for you to start creeping up A for the lurk, especially if your team is hitting towards the C side of the map, something like that. Lurking is super situational. It really just depends. It comes with experience. Try to find those gaps. But yeah, that's kind of my ramble about, I guess, how to lurk and when to lurk. Just make sure not to lurk every round because it's predictable. But yeah. To clarify a default, defaulting just means what your team does every round. So in the slides, which I've already linked in the Academy General channel, DDK goes over like what a default is and what the purpose of a default is. It's, again, to gain some map control, gain some information, condition the enemy, deny information because of that conditioning. It doesn't have to be something you do every round. Like I mentioned in the slides, tempo changes are good. Changing up the pace of a round to, for example, going from like a couple of defaults into a fast site hit is an option. A default is, again, good for like conditioning, denying enemy information, gaining some map control, gaining some information about their setup, etc. It doesn't have to be something you do every round, and it shouldn't be something you do every round. You should be changing up the pace. You should be changing up the tempo, changing up the plays that you're running to keep the enemies on their toes and unexpecting of what you're doing. So yeah, thanks for that question, RC. Cool. Any last minute questions before we call it? We are a little bit over time. If anyone has further questions, feel free to look at the slides. I've already linked them in Academy General. Feel free to DM me or ask in Academy General. Someone will get to it and be able to provide some advice. But yeah, anyways, thank you for listening to my long ramble. Hopefully this is helpful.